What Crossings does for people who are not preachers is that it allows them to hear a good sermon, even if one might not be preached.
All of my imperfections being smart for generosity.
It's become such a way of life for me.
Crossings is not a sect of Christianity. Crossings is a tool that we use to understand Christianity.
A way of understanding life. It's a lens.
It really is good, and it is something new.
So one thing I'm passionate about is golf. Oh my gosh. It actually is also the perfect embodiment of what the law is, right? Golf is all about precise mechanics. It's all about making sure your head stays down, making sure your hands get turned over right at the right time, making sure you have follow through. And when you hit that perfect shot that goes right down the middle of the fairway and lands on a perfect, just beautiful bed of grass right in the middle of the fairway, you think to yourself, I did that. And what's funny is the very next shot I'll take in the fairway and gets shanked off into a sand trap. That wasn't me at all. We live in a world that pushes us to believe that we are the ones that are saving everything, that it all depends on you and your ability to save, and your ability to make it right, and your ability to fix, and your ability to achieve, and your ability to conquer. That is reinforced in this culture all around us. It is the water we swim in this culture. When you live in a culture like that, there are really two responses. Out of control pride, that I have accomplished this, I've conquered it, and when you have that sense of pride gone awry, it makes you cling ever more tightly to that which you think that you have gained, and makes you less willing to embrace what others are doing, less open to the possibility that you could be wrong. The other part, aside from pride, is despair. Because I don't know about you, I can't possibly do this on my own. I can't possibly fix this on my own. I can't possibly get this creation to where it needs to be. I can't get my household to where it needs to be this week. When a culture tells me it's my responsibility to get this mess saved, leads me to despair and not try. So whereas pride leads me to cling ever more tightly to that which I think I have gained on my own, despair makes me just not cling to anything. That's why Crossings is important. It helps us understand that it's not up to us. What I love the most about Crossings is that we are constantly pulled into a law type of understanding of the scripture readings. And when we look at the scripture readings, we're always looking for the ways in which we are the Israelites who are the heroes of the story who are being saved. And seldom do we look at ourselves as the Egyptians who are under the condemnation of the law. But we read the text with a default setting of finding where we are the good guys. And Crossings challenges us to see where our conviction is and then really feel the weight of that conviction. To feel the weight of that conviction means that you also feel the full freedom of the gospel. I think one of the things that's probably hardest for people is the 6-step process. I understand those 6 steps through the story of the roly-poly. When my brother and I were little, we used to play outside quite a bit, and we had behind our garage really large milkweeds, and roly-polies love milkweeds. They would crawl on the milkweeds and chew at them, and my brother and I would pluck the roly-polies off the milkweeds, and they of course would be afraid, so they'd roll up in a really tight ball, and we'd roll them around in our hands, and then we'd drop them in this jar. We were headed inside with our jar of roly-polies one day, and my dad said, "No, you guys go put those roly-polies back. If you don't ever let them go so that they feel safe again, they'll stay curved up forever and they'll die." That is the law and gospel to me. That is Crossings. That is the 6 steps. How are we afraid? How are we being made afraid? What are we afraid of? What fear, what death, what sin is curving us in on ourselves? I served a church in University City. I would have to drive through East St. Louis. Every day I would commute through East St. Louis and see the poverty, but I was just on this one single road that shoots right through East St. Louis, so I never had to really engage it. I drove past this pool every day in my commute. One day I was like, you know, I'd love to take my kids to this pool. So I stopped at the pool to check their hours. And they told me at this pool, you could only swim there if you lived within their zip code. I thought, oh, okay, so I guess it's, you know, I didn't think about how that was a curved in kind of thing until I went home from Bethel and had to drive through East St. Louis. And then I realized the power of limiting your participation in this swimming pool that's really wonderful and beautiful to a zip code, and what that does, and how that curved in that community on itself. What that did was it isolated them from their surrounding community, and it kept them curved in on themselves. And instead of experiencing the joy and the diversity of different people who would like to come in and enjoy the swimming pool. When I was 15 years old, I was on a really bad path, and I got caught shoplifting. And I came home that evening and told my dad about what had happened and that we would need to be in court in a couple weeks. He didn't say anything, nothing at all. He didn't speak. We didn't speak at all for days and days, and that silence was deafening, and I started to wonder, oh my gosh, does he hate me? Does he even love me anymore? What have I done? On the day of my hearing, where I had to go before the judge and get a sentencing for this shoplifting, my dad came with me. I didn't realize how much of an example of that love for me that was until we get there, and before my dad and I went up to the bench where the judge was, a young man my exact same age went up to the bench, but he was alone, and he was in trouble for a similar crime. And the judge said to him, "Where are your parents?" And the boy said, "Well, they're not here, they couldn't come." He wasn't lying. They knew he was there, and they didn't come. And it wasn't that he was there by himself because he wanted to be. And the judge says, "Well, I'm sorry, but you can't be here on your own. Your parents have to come. Go out and see the clerk and reschedule and come when your parents can come." And he just left, dejected. And then it was our turn, and we stood up there, and my dad stood with me. And even though he hadn't spoken to me in weeks, and he was disappointed in me, and you could feel how disappointed he was in me, he stood up there with me. And I realized in that moment how deeply he loved me in spite of my brokenness. But that was not the most important lesson. That was not step 6. The most important lesson came when we left. And we left the courthouse, and we walked out the door, and that boy was sitting outside the door waiting. I don't know if he was waiting for someone to come pick him up or if he was waiting for the bus. But my dad turned and said, "You want to get lunch with us?" And it was at that moment that I realized that my dad didn't just love me, he loved this boy too, in the best way he could. He showed him love, and the love he showed for that boy made me love him even more and made me want to be better.